Thanks for watching this with me. If you're a beginner and you need a little help with painting tree limbs, then hope this video helps you out. We're going to target some areas that people have problems with. Maybe I had problems when I first started, so maybe this will clear up some of those areas for you and make painting tree limbs a little easier. They can be very aggravating, and I notice my students mostly struggle with like the width of the tree limb, and uh, they make it too big at the top, things like that. And maybe I can explain through this video what I'm doing that'll help you overcome that area in your painting if you're having those problems. So um, what you want to do is you use like a long hair liner brush for this. I mean, not a super long hair or anything like that, but just make sure the hair is not real tiny, short on some liner brushes, because it'll hold more paint for you, and you can create nice ridgedy looking limbs and things like that. So um, make sure you thin your mixture down to a real nice fluid consistency, not so thin that it runs off the canvas when you put it on. But you want it pretty thin. That's why I use oil instead of thinner. A lot of times I'll use like linseed oil or whatever oil you prefer. Then it'll kind of keep it, a little bit firmer than what thinner will do. But if that's all you have is paint thinner, then by all means use that. Just thin it down like ink or something like that, or water or something. Uh, you can always tell if you get too much by the way that it responds. Okay, now. So when the more pressure you apply to the branches, you'll notice that it makes the branches thicker and bigger. Those should go near the bottom of the tree. And I usually work sometimes from the top down, but you can work from the bottom and go up every which way you want. But the more pressure you apply, then it'll cause the branches to be wider. And you want to keep the brush moving. Notice how I'm keeping it moving. And a lot of people have the biggest problem is they don't know how to get that fine point on the end of the branches. It's a pretty simple little trick. All this takes a little practice, so get your practice canvas and try these. Um, you'll notice I'm pulling away from the canvas whenever I get to the edge of the limb. So you'll notice, look, see how I just gently start pulling away towards the tip of the limb, and it makes a fine point. And if you want to get that real crookedy looking limbs and things like that, then just simply, you'll see me in the video, I'll kind of jerk my hand. See how I'm just kind of twitch my hand a little bit? Makes it look like the limbs are kind of real twisted looking, and it gives knots and stuff on the limbs. Um, let's see. You can see I'm getting more linseed oil. The paint must be drying up, or not as thick as I want it, or thin as I want it to be. I'm sorry. Uh, so I add a little paint thinner. I add a little linseed oil to fix that, or whatever thinning agent you have. See how that limb comes out right there, and I'm adding just some little shoots off of it. And when you add your limbs, you don't want to. Sometimes less is better. Always start less and then add a little more. Don't just go up the tree and add a few on each side and see how it looks, and it'll gives me a better understanding where I might need some other limbs added to it. So uh, every tree is completely different. There's no rule that says it has to have 3 limbs on this side or 2 limbs on that side, or things like that. Just whatever you feel like it should have. I guess that would be really good. So avoid like when you paint a tree limb, if you put like 3 shoots on one, you turn your uh, limbs, I once heard, into like pitchforks, things like that, which it does. It's not visually nice looking at it that way. So kind of pay attention. Just put a few of them on, and you can go back and add tiny ones later. But just take your time, and things will come out really well. See how I'm adding just a few limbs on each side of that tree to start with. And one other thing, is I'm not afraid to, in this video, if you'll notice, I'll put my limbs crossing each other, things like that. I don't just make them look like they're scared to touch each other, because in nature, limbs grow all around each other. They grow in front, behind, just all kinds of things like that. So don't be afraid to put limbs growing in, across one another, things like that. But the thing I would stress is making sure you apply enough pressure at the, whenever you're painting the limbs. You don't apply too much pressure towards the top, because it'll make the limbs just look real thick, and your trees get thinner as they go up to the top. They get skinnier, so you don't want to have just great big limbs, and it looks like, visually, it looks like the tree can't hold up those big heavy limbs. So make sure you have uh, plenty of paint in there. It's good to just roll it around in that paint mixture, and you'll get lots of paint on there. I'm kind of twisting it in there, if you can kind of catch that whenever my camera pans around to that when I load the brush. But see how I'm going back and just adding a few little limbs and things on there. Sometimes less is better. And painting limbs, you can add just a blue million in, but if you're wanting a tree to really stand out, sometimes, just to give him some character, sometimes less limbs give him more character than a lot of limbs. So it just depends on what mood you're in, I guess. So I'm moving over to the other side, and those nice crisp lines, they push all that stuff in the background. I'm noticing as I'm reviewing this video. Notice the I come from the top down to the tree, instead of starting from the tree and working out. That's a personal preference, and you can create different types of tree limb effects that way. So I encourage you to try both ways. Start from the tree out in the where the limb's going to end, and work into the tree that way. One fun part about painting the tree limbs are just being able to take just a line and add little limbs to it. Makes it have a lot of character and all kinds of things like that. Just cool little illusion you can create with that. Just adding, you can see where I'm splitting the limbs off that branch. Just takes practice to do that with, to find stuff that you like. It's some people it might come natural, other times you may have to work at it. It's just something I've developed over time, and keep developing. You just kind of keep developing those developing your technique, and it just gets better and better. Practice is the ultimate key to painting. Is just concentrate on what you're doing, and everything will be good. Don't stop. Just keep painting, and it'll come out okay in the end. And if you see something you don't like, and you can't really wipe it off the canvas or scrape it off at that time, just let it dry and just paint over it. Oil painting is very forgiving. I'm adding, see, put a long limb in there. See how that one's a little, the width of it's a little more bold, where that limb sticks out like it's a strong limb that comes out there. Just reload, and see there, that long. Just draw your line out and then work with it. If it's got some thick area, see how I'm going back over it? That's to correct the width of it. And that one's just a little bit in front of it. Now remember, if you're doing trees and way off in the background and you got limbs and things, make sure that your mixture is a little lighter than what I have in this one here. These trees are pretty much the same, would be about the same shade, so it'd be fine. See how I've got that just a little wide, but I'm going back correcting that area. There we go. A lot of reloading, as you can tell in that. Once you get your paint thinned down, it just goes real smoothly over the canvas. thick paint's not really ideal for this right here unless you're dry brushing some things, but if you want that smooth line, you'll have to thin it down. See how I come from the edge of the canvas? That's what I was mentioning to do. You just mix it up, try different ways, you get different types of limbs. Go in there fixing it. Sometimes the lines look perfect when you put them on the limbs. Other times they look like you have to go over them a few times because they'll have be skinny and bold, and you just have to kind of get it the way you like it. See that? And you go back and put a foliage on them, so just adding. Now what I'm doing there is just putting distant small trees in the back, so that liner brush can put like little thin trees growing in the back. But there's not a great big secret to it. It's just if you're trying to do, as I mentioned before, to create. I have a lot of people. How do you make your tree branches real thin, like at the end where they come to a point? And like I said before, just remember that you load your brush with thin paint, and when you're drawing the line for the limb, you pull gently away at the end of the tree branch. Just pull away from the canvas, and it'll make it come to a real sharp point. And like I said, if you were looking for the branch to be all twisted, then kind of give it a little twitching motion when you're making it. Now what I'm doing here is I went in to see how I added some of the titanium white to the mixture, and I brightened my color way up to a light grayish brown color, and I'm adding some different color limbs. You've seen some discoloring in some limbs before in trees, so I'm just adding. See how that little white, it just pops out really well, and it just adds a little more character to that tree. Maybe that limb got bleached by some sunlight, or the bark come off of it, and all you see is just the wood that's underneath. And then see how I'm taking some of the white paint and adding some of the highlights to them. And it's important not only to highlight just the tree trunks or anything like that, to make sure that you highlight the limbs and things of that nature where the light would be hitting on the tree. Just adds one more level of detail to your painting. Okay, I've covered a lot on this. We may touch base on another video, but I think I will call this video to an end, and we'll see you next time. Remember, paint and make it happen.